The winter storm hammered the small coastal town with a fury that hadn't been seen in decades. Jack Turner pulled the workshop door against the howling wind, ready to call it a night, when headlights swept across the frosted windows. A white SUV skidded to a stop outside, engine sputtering. Through the swirling snow, he saw a woman emerge, clutching a small child against her chest, both of them shivering violently in the Arctic blast. Jack Turner had learned long ago that life rarely followed the plans you made for it. 5 years had passed since cancer took his wife Sarah, leaving him to raise their son Eli alone in this quiet harbor town, where his grandfather had first opened the woodworking shop in 1947. At 36, Jack had the weathered hands of a craftsman and the cautious heart of a widower who'd learned that love could vanish as quickly as morning fog over the harbor. He knew every grain pattern in the workshop's old beams, every creak in the floorboards of the apartment above where he and Eli lived, simply surrounded by the scent of cedar and pine. The townspeople respected Jack's skill with wood and his quiet reliability, though few knew the depth of grief he'd channeled into each piece of furniture he crafted late into the night when sleep wouldn't come. Claire Morgan existed in an entirely different world, though fate had brought her to Jack's door on this brutal night. At 32, she commanded boardrooms with the same natural authority that had propelled her to CEO of Morgan Enterprises before her 30th birthday. Her rise through the corporate ranks had been meteoric, a combination of brilliant strategic thinking and an almost supernatural ability to see market patterns before her competitors. But power and success hadn't shielded her from Victor Kane's calculated cruelty. Their marriage had begun as a merger of equals, two ambitious people who mistook intensity for passion. The divorce had made headlines in the business journals, though the real story, the subtle threats, the financial manipulation, the way he'd used their daughter Sophie as a weapon, remained hidden behind legal documents and non-disclosure agreements. Claire had spent the last 2 weeks moving from hotel to hotel, paying cash, staying off the grid, trying to protect 7-year-old Sophie from a father who saw her not as a daughter, but as leverage in his twisted game of control. They had crossed paths once before, at a community fundraiser 6 months earlier. Jack had been donating a handcrafted rocking chair for the auction, a piece made from reclaimed ship timber that had taken him 3 months to perfect. Claire had been there representing her company's charitable foundation, her presence commanding attention even as she tried to blend into the small-town crowd. Their interaction lasted barely 30 seconds. A polite nod, a murmured appreciation for his craftsmanship, her fingers briefly touching the smooth armrest he'd spent hours sanding, before the crowd swept them in different directions. Neither could have imagined that their next meeting would unfold under such desperate circumstances, that the memory of that brief encounter would resurface now in the midst of crisis. Jack opened the workshop door wider, reading the fear beneath Claire's composed exterior, recognizing the particular terror that came from running not from something but from someone. "Please," she said, her voice barely audible above the wind. "The roads are blocked. We just need somewhere safe until morning." Sophie's face was buried in her mother's shoulder, small body trembling from more than just cold. Without hesitation, Jack ushered them inside, knowing that sometimes the universe sends you exactly who you're meant to help, exactly when they need it most, even if you don't understand why. Until much later, the apartment above the workshop radiated warmth from the old cast-iron stove that had heated the space for 3 generations. Jack led them up the narrow stairs, each step creaking its familiar welcome, Claire's designer heels clicking against worn wood that had supported his family's footsteps for decades. Sophie's small hand now gripped her mother's tightly, knuckles white with a child's instinctive understanding that something was wrong, even if she couldn't name it. Eli looked up from his book, one of those adventure stories about kids who solved mysteries and saved the day, surprise flickering across his 10-year-old face at the unexpected visitors. "This is Miss Morgan and her daughter Sophie," Jack said simply, his tone conveying that no further explanation was needed, that sometimes hospitality didn't require understanding. "They'll be staying until the storm passes." What struck Jack most was how quickly the children adapted to each other's presence, as if they recognized something kindred in one another. Perhaps the loneliness that comes from being the only child in a single-parent home. Within minutes, Eli had offered Sophie his favorite blanket, the one Sarah had crocheted during her first round of chemotherapy, and was showing her how to toast marshmallows over the stove's open door, a winter tradition his mother had started years ago when the power would go out during storms. Sophie's initial shyness melted away as Eli patiently taught her the perfect distance to hold the stick, how to rotate it slowly for even browning, how to blow out the flame when it inevitably caught fire. Their laughter filled the space that had been too quiet for too long, bringing a lightness Jack hadn't felt in years, reminding him that joy could still exist even after loss. Claire perched on the edge of the worn leather sofa, her posture still rigid despite the warm environment, every muscle coiled as if ready to run at a moment's notice. She kept her phone in her hand, checking it obsessively, even though she'd claimed it had no signal, the screen's light reflecting off her face in the dim room. Jack noticed how her eyes tracked every sound from outside. Each gust of wind, each creak of the building, each distant rumble that could be thunder or could be something else entirely, as if expecting danger to burst through the door at any moment. He brought her tea in a handmade mug, one of Sarah's last pottery pieces before her hands became too weak to work the wheel, and Claire's fingers wrapped around it gratefully, seeking warmth and perhaps comfort. "You're safe here," Jack said quietly, settling into the chair across from her. The same chair where he'd sat countless nights watching Sarah sleep during her illness, learning that sometimes presence was more important than words. "This building has weathered worse storms than this one." Claire's laugh held no humor, just a bitter understanding of how relative safety could be. "I wish it were just the storm I was worried about." The children had moved to the window, Eli pointing out where the harbor usually lay beyond the wall of white, describing the boats that would bob there in summer, the lobster traps stacked on the docks. Sophie pressed her nose to the glass, leaving little fog circles that Eli turned into smiley faces with his finger, and for a moment she was just a 7-year-old girl enjoying a snow day. Their innocent joy stood in sharp contrast to the tension radiating from Claire's body. The way she kept positioning herself to see all exits, the way her hand occasionally moved to her pocket, as if checking for something. "Mom, look!" Sophie called out, her voice bright with wonder. "Eli says sometimes you can see seals from here when it's not snowing. Real seals, not just the ones in the aquarium." "That's wonderful, sweetheart," Claire replied, her voice softening for her daughter, while her knuckles stayed white around the mug, the maternal instinct to protect warring with the exhaustion of constant vigilance. Jack recognized the signs of someone running from something more dangerous than weather. He'd seen it before in a neighbor who'd fled an abusive relationship, the way she jumped at doorbell rings for months afterward. He'd seen it in a friend who'd witnessed something they shouldn't have, constantly looking over their shoulder even in the safety of their own home. The way Claire startled at every unexpected sound, how she positioned herself between Sophie and the door, the careful way she chose her words as if they might be used against her later. All of it spoke of a fear that had nothing to do with the blizzard raging outside. As the evening deepened and the children began to yawn, their energy finally depleted by excitement and warmth, Jack made up the small guest room that had once been his wife's craft space. The walls still held faint marks from her design sketches, dreams of quilts she'd never finish. Claire tucked Sophie in with a gentleness that revealed the fierce love beneath her polished exterior, singing a lullaby so quietly Jack could barely hear it from the hallway. When she returned to the living room, her shoulders finally began to drop, exhaustion winning its battle against hypervigilance. "Thank you," she whispered. And Jack understood she meant for more than just the shelter, for not asking questions, for creating normalcy for Sophie, for offering safety without conditions. The truth emerged slowly, like ice melting under warm water, each revelation adding another layer to the story. Claire sat with her second cup of tea, the children asleep in their respective rooms, the storm creating a white noise buffer between them and the world that seemed increasingly dangerous with each detail she shared. Jack had learned patience in his years of working with wood. You couldn't rush the grain, couldn't force the joints, had to let the material tell you what it wanted to become. People, he'd found, were much the same, their stories emerging in their own time. "Victor won't stop," Claire finally said, her voice barely above a whisper, as if speaking louder might somehow summon him. "My ex-husband, he's not used to losing. And the divorce." It was the first time anyone ever told him no. Jack remained silent, letting her words find their own rhythm, understanding that sometimes the most important thing was simply to witness someone's truth. Outside, The wind had picked up, rattling the old windows in their frames, but the sound seemed distant compared to the weight of Claire's story. He comes from old money, the kind that's been making rules for so long, they've forgotten rules apply to them too. His father is a federal judge. His uncle runs the second-largest investment firm on the East Coast. When we met, I thought his confidence was attractive. His connections were just good business. I didn't realize until too late that to him, everything is a transaction. Everyone is either useful or disposable. Claire's hands trembled slightly as she set down the mug. When I filed for divorce, he laughed. Said I'd never work in business again, that he'd destroy everything I'd built. When the court granted me primary custody of Sophie anyway, he told me I'd regret it. Said he'd make sure I understood what real power looked like. And the police? Jack asked, though he suspected the answer from the defeat in her shoulders. Victor's golf buddy is the deputy chief. Another friend sits on the state Supreme Court. His former roommate from Princeton runs the largest private security firm in 3 states. Every complaint I filed disappeared, got lost in paperwork, or was dismissed as a misunderstanding. One officer actually told me I should be grateful Victor still cared enough to want to be involved in Sophie's life. She looked directly at Jack for the first time since beginning her story, her eyes holding a mixture of anger and exhaustion. I have money, influence, run a successful company with 200 employees, and none of it matters. He systematically isolated me from every support system, frozen assets through legal challenges, painted me as an unstable mother in the media. There are 3 different gossip blogs running stories about my supposed mental breakdown, complete with photoshopped images of me at facilities I've never been to. Jack understood powerlessness, though his had come in the form of medical helplessness. Watching Sarah fade, despite all their prayers and treatments, despite the specialists and experimental procedures. But this was different, a deliberate cruelty inflicted by someone who'd once claimed to love her, who'd stood beside her at an altar and promised to cherish and protect. 2 weeks ago, I found a tracking device on my car, hidden inside the rear bumper. Then, strange men started showing up at Sophie's school, claiming to be security consultants evaluating campus safety. The principal called me concerned. They had legitimate-looking credentials, but something felt wrong. That night, Sophie told me a man at the playground asked her if she'd like to visit her daddy. Said he had a special surprise waiting. That's when I knew we had to run. How did you end up here? Jack asked. This town isn't exactly on the way to anywhere. That's precisely why I chose it. Random turns, no pattern, no destination. I've been paying cash only, using fake names at motels, switching cars twice, using rental agencies that don't require credit cards. I thought I'd been careful enough. She pulled out her phone, showed him the screen where no bars appeared, the storm having knocked out the cell towers. I disabled the GPS, took out the SIM card, even had a friend check for tracking software. But Victor has resources I probably don't even know about. Connections in places I can't imagine. The weight of her situation settled into the room like another presence, heavy and suffocating. Jack thought of Eli, safe and innocent in his bed. Of Sophie, who deserved the same peaceful childhood, the same chance to worry about nothing more serious than tomorrow's homework. Some fights, he realized, chose you whether you were ready or not. You can stay as long as you need, he said, meaning it. This town takes care of its own. And, right now, that includes you and Sophie. Claire's eyes glistened with unshed tears. You don't know what you're offering, what he's capable of. He destroyed my business partner's career, just for supporting me during the divorce. Had him audited, investigated, harassed until he had to leave the state. Maybe not, Jack agreed, remembering his own battles. Different, but no less consuming. But I know what it's like to protect someone you love, and I know that running only works if you have somewhere to run to. The wind outside seemed to pause, as if the storm itself was holding its breath, and in that moment of silence, they both heard it. The low rumble of an engine somewhere beyond the white curtain of snow, too steady to be thunder, too deliberate to be coincidence. Jack moved to the window first, careful to stay to the side, peering out through the narrow gap between frame and wall. using skills he'd learned in the Navy 20 years ago. Before woodworking, before Sarah, before his life became about creating rather than destroying, the workshop's exterior floodlight, motion-activated and battery-powered, hadn't triggered, which meant whoever was out there was staying beyond its range. Watching. Waiting. Through the dense snowfall, he could make out headlights, stationary but lit, like eyes in the darkness. They weren't moving, just sitting there about 50 yards away. Engine running. Patient, as predators. Evaluating prey. Eli's room, he said quietly to Claire, his voice carrying the calm authority of someone who'd made decisions under pressure before. Wake Sophie. Keep them together, away from windows. The closet in there is reinforced. Used to be a safe room, when bootleggers owned this place during Prohibition. Claire didn't question, didn't hesitate, recognizing the voice of someone who knew how to handle danger. She moved with the fluid efficiency of someone who'd rehearsed this scenario in their mind dozens of times, probably lying awake in anonymous motel rooms, planning for the worst. Jack heard her gentle voice rousing the children, Eli's sleepy confusion mixing with Sophie's immediate alertness. The child had learned to read her mother's fear like a barometer. Jack killed the lights throughout the apartment, plunging them into darkness save for the faint glow from the stove's dying embers. His eyes adjusted quickly, muscle memory guiding him through the familiar space where he'd navigated countless times in the dark during Sophie's illness. When he'd check on her without wanting to wake her, he grabbed his phone, found it dead. The storm had knocked out more than just the cell towers. Probably taken down power lines throughout the county. The landline in the workshop might still work, but that would mean leaving them alone up here, vulnerable. Through the window, he watched a second set of headlights join the first, positioning itself at a different angle, covering more ground. Then a third vehicle arrived, completing a loose triangle formation. 3 vehicles for 1 woman and a child. This wasn't a rescue party. This was a hunting party. Claire returned to his side, her breath shallow but controlled. "I found it," she whispered, holding up a small device no bigger than a quarter, its tiny LED light still blinking green. It was sewn into Sophie's favorite stuffed animal, inside Mr. Button's. "The one thing I never thought to check, because she's had it since she was 2. Victor gave her a new improved version for her birthday last month. Said the old one looked worn out. She won't sleep without it." The cruelty of it, using a child's comfort object as a tracking device, corrupting something innocent into a tool of surveillance, told Jack everything he needed to know about Victor Kane. This wasn't about custody or even control. This was about winning, about proving that Claire could never escape his reach, that his power extended into every corner of her life, even into their daughter's bed. "Is there another way out?" Claire asked, her CEO composure cracking under maternal terror, the executive who'd handled hostile takeovers facing something far more personal. Loading dock in the back of the workshop leads to the old pier road. From there, it's about 300 yards to the tree line. But in this snow, with the kids, Jack trailed off, calculating distances and dangers, wind speed, and visibility. There's an old fishing cabin, about a quarter mile through the woods. My friend Tom owns it, keeps it stocked for emergencies. Food, water, emergency radio. If you can make it there, you can wait out the storm, call for help when the phones come back. What about you? Jack was already moving, pulling on his boots, grabbing the emergency kit from the closet, checking the flashlight batteries with practiced efficiency. Someone needs to buy you time. Make them think you're still here, maybe heading out the front. He handed her a flashlight, his workshop keys, and a hand-drawn map he sketched quickly on the back of an envelope. The blue key opens the loading dock. Follow the tree line. Keep the wind at your back. Tom's cabin has a red door, only one out there. The spare key is under a fake rock by the left corner of the porch. I can't let you. Yes, you can. His voice carried the quiet authority of someone who'd already made peace with his decision, who understood that some stands were worth taking regardless of the cost. I know this building like my own heartbeat. I know these woods, every trail and hollow. I know this storm and how it moves. You don't. Get the kids to safety. That's all that matters now. The phone in Jack's pocket suddenly buzzed, Apparently one carrier service had flickered back to life temporarily, probably bouncing off a tower further inland. Unknown number. But he didn't need caller ID to know who it would be. He answered, knowing he was entering a negotiation where the other party held most of the cards. Mr. Turner. The voice was cultured, cold, completely at odds with the violence of the storm, like hearing a snake speak in a British accent. My name is Victor Kane. I believe you have something that belongs to me. Jack felt Claire tense beside him, her hand moving instinctively toward the stairs where the children waited, but he squeezed her shoulder gently, signaling her to stay quiet, to let him handle this opening gambit. I have 2 guests who needed shelter from the storm. Last I checked. That's not a crime. Even in this state. Don't play games with me, Turner. I know exactly who you are. Small-town carpenter, widower. Struggling to make ends meet, raising a boy alone. Navy veteran, honorable discharge. Clean record except for a few late mortgage payments after your wife's illness. You have no idea what you've stepped into here. The casual recitation of his personal information was meant to intimidate, to show the reach of Victor's resources. Jack recognized the tactic from his military days. Psychological warfare, establishing dominance through information asymmetry. I know enough, Jack replied, watching the shadows move around the vehicles outside, counting figures, estimating numbers. I know a bully when I hear one. Victor's laugh was sharp as breaking glass. A bully? How quaint. I'm a father trying to protect his daughter from an unstable mother. Did Claire tell you about her mental health issues? The medication she's supposed to be taking? The psychiatric holds that had to be placed for her own safety? She told me enough to know you're lying. Did she? Did she mention the incident at Sophie's school last month? The scene she caused at the board meeting? The restraining order I had to file after she threatened me? I have documentation, Turner. Medical records, police reports, witness statements. I'm trying to help her, to get her the treatment she needs. Just send them out, and this all ends peacefully. I have doctors waiting at a private facility. The best care money can buy. Jack recognized the tactic. Gaslighting wrapped in concern, lies dressed as love, the abuser's playbook of painting the victim as the dangerous one. Here's what's going to happen, Kane. You're going to turn those vehicles around and leave. The storm's getting worse. And I'd hate for you to get stuck out here. Road back to town floods when the tide comes in. And that's in about an hour. You're not listening, Turner. I have legal documents giving me emergency custody based on Claire's mental state. My security team has authorization to retrieve my daughter by any means necessary. You're harboring a kidnapper, interfering with a custody order. That's a federal offense. I'm sheltering a mother and child from a storm, Jack countered, his voice steady as the beams holding up his roof. And last I checked, your divorce decree doesn't give you any rights to break into my home in the middle of the night with what looks like a small army. 3 minutes, Turner. After that, my security team comes in. They're all former military. Like yourself. They're very good at their job. And unlike you, they're not emotionally compromised. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. 2 minutes, 59 seconds, Jack replied. Plenty of time for me to upload the security footage from my workshop to the cloud. You know, the cameras that have been recording since your vehicles arrived. The ones that will show armed men breaking into a private residence where children are present. I'm sure the media would find that fascinating, especially given your family's political connections. Silence on the line for a moment. Then Victor's voice returned. Harder now, the veneer of civility cracking. You have no idea what you're risking, Turner. Your son, your business, your life in this pathetic little town. I can destroy all of it with 3 phone calls. 2 minutes, 30 seconds, Jack said. Then ended the call. He turned to Claire, pulled her close enough to whisper directly in her ear, feeling her tremble against him. Go. Now. Take the kids through the workshop. Out the back. Don't stop. Don't look back, no matter what you hear. She gripped his arm with surprising strength. What are you going to do? What I do best, he said, managing a slight smile that he hoped was reassuring. Work with wood. Claire understood. This was his territory, his domain. She pressed something into his hand. A business card, expensive stock, embossed letters. When this is over, if you need anything, ever, lawyers, money, a new life somewhere else, just keep Sophie safe. That's all the payment I need. She kissed his cheek, a gesture so unexpected and tender that it momentarily transported him back to better times, to Sarah's goodbye kiss the morning before her final surgery. Then she was gone, moving toward the children's room with the determined grace of a mother protecting her young. Jack gave them 90 seconds, listening to the muffled sounds of their escape down the back stairs, the careful creak of the workshop door, the whisper of wind as it opened and closed. Then he deliberately turned on the living room light and walked past the window, making sure his silhouette was visible, stretching as if he'd just woken up. He opened the front door to the apartment, letting it bang against the wall as if someone had left in a hurry, then knocked over a chair for good measure. He created a clear trail of disturbance leading toward the front of the building, away from the loading dock, like laying a false scent for hunting dogs. His workshop was more than just a business. It was a three-dimensional puzzle he'd been solving for 20 years, adding equipment, reorganizing spaces, learning every corner and shadow. Every beam, every tool, every pile of lumber had purpose and potential. In the darkness, guided by touch and memory, Jack began his preparations. His mind shifting into the tactical mode he'd thought he'd left behind with his uniform. He strung aircraft cable between the main support posts at ankle height, invisible in the darkness, strong enough to trip a running man. He balanced sheets of plywood against doorframes, ready to fall at the slightest touch, creating obstacles and noise. He positioned cans of wood stain on high shelves, ready to tip and create slippery hazards. Most importantly, he positioned himself behind the massive oak workbench his grandfather had built, solid enough to stop bullets if it came to that, though he prayed it wouldn't. The front door exploded inward at exactly the 3-minute mark. 4 men entered in tactical formation, flashlights attached to what looked like military-grade weapons, their movements professional, coordinated, not security guards, mercenaries, private military contractors, the kind of men who'd learned their trade in places where rules were suggestions. "Clear the building," Victor's voice crackled through their radios. "The woman and child are priority. The men are collateral, but I'd prefer no casualties if possible. Too much paperwork." Jack waited until the first man passed his position, then pulled the release cord he'd rigged. 100 pounds of oak planks crashed down from the loft, sending the man sprawling, his weapon skittering across the concrete floor. The sound was tremendous in the enclosed space, designed to disorient as much as disable. The second man spun toward the noise, caught the tripwire, and went down hard, his head striking the concrete with a dull thud. Jack was on him before he could recover, using a chokehold he'd learned in the Navy, applying just enough pressure to render him unconscious without permanent damage. The man went limp, breathing but neutralized. The third man was smarter, more cautious. He moved along the walls, weapon sweeping in controlled arcs, using proper room-clearing technique. Jack circled opposite, using the maze of equipment and lumber to stay hidden, becoming one with the shadows he knew so well. The workshop that had been his sanctuary, his place of creation, became a tactical advantage. He knew every blind spot, every acoustic quirk, every loose board that would creak under weight. "Turner!" Victor's voice boomed from outside, amplified now through what sounded like a megaphone. "This is pointless. We have thermal imaging. We know they're not here anymore. We tracked them to the tree line." Jack's blood chilled. If they knew Claire and the children had fled, if they had that kind of equipment. "But you interest me," Victor continued, entering the workshop himself, expensive shoes crunching on sawdust, seemingly unconcerned about the danger. The loyal knight, protecting the damsel. How wonderfully antiquated. How perfectly naive. Did she promise you money? Or perhaps something more personal? Did she play the vulnerable woman, needing a strong man's protection? Jack remained silent, tracking Victor's movement by sound, noting how the man stayed behind his security team, letting others take the risks. The man was heading toward the back, toward the loading dock, following the trail but not fast enough to catch up. They can't have gone far in this storm, Victor mused, his tone conversational, as if discussing a minor business setback. My men will find them within the hour. Thermal imaging, night vision, satellite phone to coordinate with the helicopter that's standing by. But you've caused me inconvenience, Turner. That requires compensation. Jack moved silently, positioning himself between Victor and the rear exit. If Claire had made it to the tree line, she'd need at least 10 more minutes to reach Tom's cabin in this snow, maybe 15 with the children. He needed to buy them that time. I looked you up, you know, Victor continued, his voice carrying that particular cruelty of someone who enjoyed causing pain. Sarah Turner died of pancreatic cancer 5 years ago. Stage 4, diagnosed too late. Medical bills must have been crushing. Second mortgage on the house, loans from friends, fundraisers that barely covered the chemo. Is that why you're helping Claire? Hoping for a payout? Or is it something else? Does she remind you of your dead wife? Are you trying to save her? Because you couldn't save Sarah? The mention of Sarah's name, the casual dissection of his grief, ignited something cold and precise in Jack's chest. He stepped out from cover, blocking Victor's path, no longer interested in hiding. You want to know why I'm helping her? Jack's voice was steady as seasoned oak, carrying across the workshop with quiet authority. Because I know what it's like to watch someone you love fight something that's trying to destroy them. The difference is, Sarah's enemy was disease. It didn't have a choice in what it was. Claire's enemy is you. And you're choosing to be a monster. Victor smiled, all teeth and no warmth, the expression of someone who'd never faced real consequences. How poetic. How noble. Marcus, eliminate this problem. The fourth man emerged from the shadows, weapon raised, laser sight painting a red dot on Jack's chest. Jack dove behind the industrial saw, heard the crack of gunfire, felt splinters explode above his head. This had escalated beyond anything he'd imagined, beyond a custody dispute into something darker. But then, cutting through the storm's howl, came the sound of salvation. Sirens. Multiple sirens, growing louder, the distinctive wail of police, fire, and emergency services. Victor's expression shifted from confidence to calculation. The businessman computing odds and outcomes. How? The phones are down. Old landline in the basement, Jack said, which was partly true. What he didn't mention was the silent alarm he'd installed years ago after a break-in attempt, connected directly to the sheriff's personal cell phone through a dedicated cellular backup. His friend Tom wasn't just a cabin owner. He was also the county sheriff, and the alarm had been triggering since the moment the first man entered the workshop. This isn't over, Victor snarled, already backing toward the exit as red and blue lights painted the snow outside, the vehicles sliding to stops despite the weather. Legal custody is still being determined. I have rights. I have judges who owe me favors. And I have witnesses, Jack replied, gesturing to the security cameras he'd installed last summer, their red recording lights blinking steadily, having captured everything. Everything that happened here tonight. Your threats on the phone, your armed men, your admission that you've been tracking them with an illegal device, the gunfire at an unarmed civilian. I'm sure the court will find it fascinating, especially the part where you admitted to fabricating mental health claims. Victor's face contorted with rage, the mask of civility completely gone now. You have no idea what you've done. I'll destroy you. I'll take everything you have. I've already lost everything that mattered, Jack said quietly. And I survived. That's the difference between us, Kane. I know what real loss is. You're just playing games. The sirens were too close now. Officers already taking positions outside. Tom's voice boomed through a loudspeaker, ordering everyone to exit with hands visible. Victor turned to his men, his voice tight with barely controlled fury. We're leaving. Now. My lawyers will handle this. They retreated into the storm, their vehicles disappearing into the white chaos as the sheriff's SUVs surrounded the building. Tom himself led the charge inside, taking in the damage, the weapons on the floor, the unconscious men, Jack's steady stance, despite the chaos around him. Claire and Sophie? Tom asked quietly, already knowing the answer from Jack's earlier signal. Safe, Jack confirmed. Your cabin. Tom nodded, already directing his deputies to secure the scene, gather evidence, document everything. "We'll handle this." "Go to them. They need time to feel safe first," Jack said. "Let them know the threat's contained. But don't crowd them. Sophie's been through enough." Spring arrived gradually on the coast that year, ice giving way to tentative green shoots, the harbor returning to life after winter's grip finally loosened. Jack stood at the workshop window, the same window where he'd first seen Claire's SUV that night, watching Eli and Sophie race along the beach, their laughter carrying on the salt breeze. 3 months had passed since the storm, 3 months of legal battles that had played out in both courtrooms and headlines, testimony that had finally shifted the narrative from Victor's carefully crafted lies to the truth of his abuse. Victor Kane was facing federal charges for conspiracy, assault with a deadly weapon, violating custody orders, and interstate stalking. The security footage from Jack's workshop, combined with Claire's documented evidence of years of abuse, had been devastating in court. The tracker in Sophie's stuffed animal had been the final nail. Judges didn't look kindly on parents who violated their children's trust so fundamentally. More importantly, Sophie was safe. Her nightmares gradually replaced by dreams of tide pools and sailing lessons that Jack had started teaching both children. Claire had surprised everyone, most of all herself, by not returning to the city immediately. She'd rented a house 2 streets over, a modest Victorian that needed work. Nothing like her former penthouse life, but somehow more real. She'd opened a small satellite office for her company, running virtual meetings while being present for Sophie in a way she'd never been able to before. The transformation was remarkable. From the polished executive who'd arrived in designer clothes to a woman who now walked the beach barefoot, who laughed freely, who'd learned to trust again. "They're getting along well," Claire said, joining Jack at the window. She'd traded her designer suits for jeans and a fisherman's sweater she'd bought at the local thrift shop, though she still carried herself with that natural grace that had nothing to do with clothes and everything to do with character. "Kids are resilient," Jack replied, though he was thinking how Eli had bloomed since having a friend his age nearby, how Sophie had helped fill a silence in their home that he hadn't even realized was there. The boy who'd been too serious, too quiet since his mother's death, now laughed daily, planned adventures, acted his age. They stood together, not quite touching but aware of each other's presence in that way, that spoke of possibility rather than certainty. Neither was ready for what this might become. Claire still healing from years of manipulation, learning to trust her own judgment again. Jack still carrying Sarah's memory like a warm stone in his pocket, not ready to let go, but beginning to understand that making room for new love didn't mean erasing old love. But there was something here, patient and unhurried as wood grain forming over years, strong because it grew slowly. "I never thanked you properly," Claire said, her voice soft. "For that night. For everything after. For testifying when you didn't have to. For facing Victor's lawyers. For making sure Sophie felt safe every single day since." "You did," Jack reminded her. "Every time you walked into that courtroom and told the truth. Every time you stood up to him. Every time you chose to stay here instead of running again." She turned to face him fully, and he could see the executive she'd been and the woman she was becoming, both existing in the same person. "I'm not talking about the legal victory. I'm talking about you showing me that not every man who offers protection expects payment. That strength doesn't always come with conditions. That sometimes people help simply because it's right." Before Jack could respond, the kids burst through the door, faces flushed with excitement and adventure, bringing the smell of sea salt and sunshine with them. Sophie was clutching a piece of sea glass, green as spring itself, while Eli carried a piece of driftwood that would definitely become part of a fort later. "Mom! Jack! Look what we found!" Sophie's voice was bright, unguarded, so different from the frightened child who'd arrived in the storm. "Eli says if we collect enough, we can make a window hanging. There's a seal, a real seal." "Can we go back and see?" Eli added, already heading for the door again. His enthusiasm infectious. After lunch, Claire laughed, the sound genuine and free, no longer carrying the edge of anxiety that had defined her for so long. "And only if Jack comes with us." "I suppose I could close the shop early," Jack said, catching Eli's hopeful grin. Seems like a good day for seal watching. As they gathered jackets and packed sandwiches, Claire working alongside him in the kitchen with an ease that suggested familiarity, Jack caught her eye. She smiled, soft and real. And he felt something shift in his chest, not the sharp pain of loss he'd carried for so long, but something else. An opening. A beginning. The understanding that hearts could expand rather than replace, that love wasn't a zero-sum game. They walked to the beach as a group, but not quite a family, not yet. That would come later, slowly, built with the same patience and care Jack brought to his craft. For now, it was enough to walk together toward the water. 4 people who'd found each other in a storm and chosen to stay when the weather cleared, chosen to build something new from the pieces of their broken pasts. The seals were there, just as the children had promised, sunning themselves on the old pier posts, whiskers twitching in the afternoon light. Sophie slipped her hand into Jack's as they watched, a gesture so natural and trusting that it took his breath away. On his other side, Eli was explaining seal facts he'd learned at school, his voice animated, while Claire listened with genuine interest, asking questions that made him beam with pride. "Did you know they can hold their breath for up to 2 hours?" Eli said, his knowledge overflowing. "And they can dive really deep. Like 300 feet. That's amazing," Claire responded, and meant it. "You know so much about them." "Mom used to take me to watch them," Eli said, and for the first time, mentioning his mother didn't carry only sadness. She said they always come back to the same places, like they remember where home is. This was what Victor Kane, with all his power and money, could never understand. That real strength came from protection freely given. That love grew in safety and patience. That sometimes the most precious things were built not from force, but from choosing, again and again, to show up for each other. That healing happened not in grand gestures but in small moments like this, watching seals on a Tuesday afternoon, building trust one shared experience at a time. The sun was warm on their faces, spring finally keeping its promise of renewal. Somewhere in Jack's workshop, the chair he was building sat unfinished, but that was all right. There was time. There was always time for the things that mattered, for the careful work of building something meant to last. The storm had brought them together, but it was choice that kept them here. Choice that would eventually transform 4 broken pieces into something whole and strong and beautiful. As they walked back home, Sophie chattering about the seals, Eli planning tomorrow's adventure, Claire's hand briefly brushing Jack's in a touch that promised without demanding, Jack thought about Sarah. About how she would have loved this moment. These people. He thought she would have understood that love wasn't diminished by being shared, that hearts could hold multiple truths simultaneously. The storm had passed, but what it had brought to shore was just beginning to reveal itself, like sea glass polished by waves, beautiful because it had been broken and remade by forces beyond its control. The rain hammered against the coffee shop windows as evening descended upon the city. Elena Sterling sat motionless in her wheelchair, her 7-month pregnant belly prominent beneath her soaked coat. At 26, her once bright eyes now stared hollowly at the letter bearing her father's signature. Richard Sterling's words blurred through her tears. Daniel Carter pushed through the door, his janitor's uniform damp from the downpour. His gaze found her immediately. "Are you okay?" he asked gently, his voice cutting through her despair. Elena Sterling had once been the golden daughter of one of America's most powerful CEOs. Richard Sterling had built his empire from nothing, transforming a small tech startup in his garage into Sterling Group, a billion-dollar corporation that dominated 3 sectors of the technology industry. The company's headquarters occupied 40 floors of prime Manhattan real estate, its influence reaching across 6 continents. After his wife Margaret died of a sudden heart attack when Elena was 15, Richard buried himself deeper in quarterly reports and board meetings, believing that success and wealth would somehow fill the void her death had carved into their family. Elena understood his grief because she felt it too, the absence of her mother like a phantom limb that ached in quiet moments. She threw herself into her studies at Yale with the same single-minded determination, graduating summa cum laude in business administration with a minor in international finance. Every summer was spent interning at Sterling Group, shadowing executives, learning supply chains, understanding market dynamics, preparing to inherit an empire. She was being groomed from birth to carry on the sterling legacy. Her face already familiar to board members who saw her as Richard's natural successor. Then came the accident 2 years ago on Interstate 95. It was a rainy November evening, much like this one. A drunk driver in a pickup truck ran a red light at 70 miles per hour, T-boning Elena's Mercedes and crushing it against a concrete barrier. The paramedics used the jaws of life to extract her from the wreckage. 11 hours of surgery saved her life, but the damage to her spinal cord was complete and irreversible. L2 and L3 vertebrae shattered beyond repair. Paralyzed from the waist down at 24, Elena spent 6 months in rehabilitation learning to navigate the world from a wheelchair. Richard hired the best specialists from Johns Hopkins, Mayo Clinic, even flew in experts from Switzerland. He bought her the most advanced wheelchair money could buy. Carbon fiber frame, smart technology, custom modifications that cost more than most people's cars. The entire Sterling mansion was renovated for accessibility ramps installed, doorways widened, an elevator added, bathrooms rebuilt. But he couldn't hide his disappointment when board members whispered about succession plans, questioning whether someone in a wheelchair could command respect in hostile negotiations, whether she could project the strength needed to lead. At a charity gala 8 months ago for the Children's Hospital where Margaret had volunteered for 15 years, Elena met Adrian Miller. He approached her during the silent auction, commenting on her aggressive bidding strategy for a Monet reproduction. 30 years old with perfectly styled dark hair that never seemed out of place, ocean blue eyes that seemed to see into her soul, and designer suits that cost more than most people's monthly salaries. Adrian seemed to see past her wheelchair. Where others saw limitation, he claimed to see strength. He pursued her relentlessly over the following weeks, sending exotic orchids to her physical therapy sessions every Tuesday and Thursday morning, showing up at the adapted swimming pool where she did her exercises, learning about her favorite authors and surprising her with first edition Hemingways and Fitzgeralds. He attended every Sterling Group public event, always finding reasons to be near her, to offer assistance she didn't need but appreciated anyway. Against her better judgment, and despite her father's initial warnings about Adrian's reputation as a corporate climber, Elena fell deeply and completely in love. When she discovered she was pregnant after weeks of morning sickness she'd attributed to stress, Adrian held her as she cried, promised marriage, painted pictures of their future. A spring wedding at his family's vineyard in Napa Valley. A nursery overlooking Central Park. Private schools. Family vacations to Europe. He spoke of raising their child to appreciate both business and art, to be compassionate and strong. But promises, Elena was learning the hard way, meant nothing to men like Adrian Miller. Richard discovered the pregnancy during their monthly family dinner, a tradition he'd maintained despite rarely being emotionally present. Elena couldn't hide her morning sickness any longer, rushing to the bathroom twice during the appetizer course, returning pale and shaking. His face transformed from confusion to understanding to fury, to something far worse, shame mixed with visceral disgust. The daughter he'd once proudly introduced at board meetings, whose intelligence he'd bragged about to competitors, was now unmarried, pregnant, and paralyzed. In his warped perspective, she'd become everything Sterling Group shouldn't represent. The conversation afterward was brutal. "You're pregnant," he stated, not asked, his voice cold as winter steel. Elena nodded, her hand protectively over her belly. "Adrian and I are getting married. We're in love." Richard's laugh was bitter enough to curdle milk. "Love? You think that opportunist loves anything besides money and status?" His father's company went bankrupt 2 years ago. He's been circling Sterling Group like a vulture, and you were stupid enough to let him in. The real confrontation happened on a Thursday evening, 3 days after the disastrous dinner. Richard summoned Elena to his mahogany-paneled study, where he'd made billion-dollar deals and destroyed competitors with a phone call. The oil paintings of previous Sterling patriarchs seemed to glare down at Elena as she wheeled herself in, their eyes following her with disapproval. Richard stood behind his massive desk like a general preparing for war, his Italian suit impeccable despite the late hour, his expression carved from stone. "How could you be so irresponsible?" His voice carried the same tone he used when firing executives who'd failed quarterly projections. 26 years of preparation, the best education money could buy, and you throw it all away for what? A few months of passion with a man who's obviously using you? Elena gripped her wheelchair's armrests until her knuckles turned white, fighting to keep her voice steady. I'm in love, Dad. Adrian and I are getting married next spring. This baby is wanted and loved, which is more than I felt growing up in this museum you call a home. Richard's face darkened at the insult. Adrian Miller? That opportunist who's been sniffing around our competitors like a dog in heat? His last 3 relationships were with heiresses and executives' daughters. You think you're special? You think he sees past the sterling name? The word stung because Elena had started wondering the same thing. Adrian's calls had grown infrequent over the past month, always claiming work obligations. His visits were shorter, often ending with carefully casual questions about Sterling Group's expansion plans or her father's investment strategies for the Asian markets. He'd forgotten her birthday last week, sending a generic bouquet with a card his secretary had clearly signed. You don't know him like I do, she insisted, though her voice wavered with growing doubt. He sees me as more than just my wheelchair or my last name. He makes me feel whole again. Richard pulled out his phone, swiping through photos from a gossip blog that specialized in destroying reputations for profit. Elena, at a modest restaurant in Queens she'd thought was safe from prying eyes, her pregnancy obvious beneath a simple dress she'd bought off the rack, the headline reading Sterling heiress's secret shame, billionaire's daughter breeding out of wedlock. Below were hundreds of comments. So cruel, Elena stopped reading. After the first few comparing her to a beached whale. You're destroying everything I built, Richard said coldly, his voice like ice cracking on a frozen lake. The board is already questioning my judgment for keeping you as heir apparent after your accident. 3 major investors called this morning threatening to pull out. Stock prices dropped 3% in 6 hours because of these photos. Our competitors are laughing at us, calling Sterling Group weak, saying I've lost control of my own family. Elena felt tears burning her eyes but refused to let them fall. I'm your daughter, not a stock option or a PR strategy. Mom would be disgusted by what you've become. You were my successor, Richard corrected, refilling his glass with 40-year-old scotch that cost more than most people's rent. Now you're a liability that threatens 40 years of building this empire. Your mother understood sacrifice for the greater good. She gave up her career to support mine. She gave up her career because you demanded it, Elena shot back. And it killed her. The stress of being your perfect corporate wife gave her that heart attack. The silence stretched between them like a chasm impossible to bridge. Finally, Richard opened his desk drawer, pulling out documents his team of lawyers had prepared that afternoon. Sign these. You'll receive a settlement of $500,000, enough to live quietly somewhere far from here. Europe, perhaps, where the scandal won't follow. In exchange, you'll relinquish all claims to Sterling Group, surrender your board position effective immediately, and have no further contact with our business associates or clients. You'll also sign a non-disclosure agreement about company operations. Elena stared at the papers, recognizing the legal language that meant complete severance from everything she'd known. You're disowning me? Your only child? The daughter Mom died believing you'd protect? Richard's jaw clenched at the mention of Margaret. Your mother understood that the company comes first. It's what ensures our family's legacy for generations. What family? Elena asked bitterly. The one you're destroying right now? The one you destroyed when you spread your legs for the first man who pretended to care, Richard snapped, the vulgarity shocking them both. You have 48 hours to decide, he continued, recovering his composure. If you refuse, you leave with nothing but the clothes on your back. Your credit cards are already frozen. The apartment in your name has been transferred back to the company. Your car has been repossessed. Choose wisely. That night, Elena packed what she could carry in 2 suitcases and a duffel bag. Her hands shook as she folded clothes, choosing practical items over designer pieces. She'd saved $3,000 in cash, hidden in her mother's old jewelry box behind the pearls Margaret had worn on her wedding day. As rain began falling, matching the tears she could no longer hold back, she wheeled herself out of the 20-room mansion where she'd taken her first steps, spoken her first words, celebrated birthdays, and mourned her mother. The security guard at the gate wouldn't meet her eyes as she passed, already informed of her new status as persona non grata. Daniel Carter was finishing his 10-hour shift at the Bentwood office complex, his back aching from mopping 3 floors and cleaning 47 bathrooms, when he saw her through the sheets of rain. The coffee shop was closed, its neon sign dark. But Elena sat under the small awning, trying futilely to escape the downpour. Her expensive clothes were soaked through, her blonde hair plastered to her face like seaweed, mascara running in dark rivers down her cheeks. She looked nothing like the confident woman he'd seen in Forbes magazine just 6 months ago, profiled as the future of Sterling Group. Daniel had noticed her earlier that week, entering the coffee shop each afternoon around 3, ordering chamomile tea she barely touched, staring at her phone as if willing it to ring. The barista, Jenny, had mentioned she'd been coming for days, always alone, always sad, barely speaking except to order. Tonight was different. Tonight she looked completely broken, like someone who'd lost everything that mattered and had no idea how to continue breathing. "Miss, you'll catch pneumonia out here," Daniel said, approaching slowly so as not to startle her. The last thing she needed was another shock to her system. Elena looked up, startled by the kindness in his voice, after days of harsh words and rejection. "The shop's closed. I'm just waiting for the rain to stop. This storm's supposed to last all night according to the weather service," Daniel said, checking his phone. "Are you waiting for someone to pick you up?" "I could wait with you if you'd like." "For somewhere to go," she admitted quietly, her voice barely audible over the rain hammering the pavement. "I used to have a driver. I used to have a lot of things." Daniel glanced at her luggage. Louis Vuitton pieces he recognized from magazines, now soaked and mud-splattered. He noticed her wheelchair, a high-tech model that probably cost more than he made in 6 months. Her pregnancy was obvious, despite her loose sweater. His own struggles as a single father had taught him to recognize desperation in all its forms. He'd worn that same expression after Sarah's funeral, standing in their empty apartment, wondering how he'd raise Ethan alone. "Look, I know this sounds crazy, and you have absolutely no reason to trust me, but my apartment's just 3 blocks away on Riverside. You could dry off, warm up, maybe eat something, and figure out your next move. No strings, no expectations, just human kindness." Elena studied him carefully, cataloging details. His uniform was worn but meticulously clean. Name tag, reading Daniel C. His face was weathered but kind, laugh lines around brown eyes that held a sadness matching her own. His hands were calloused from work but gentle-looking. "I don't even know you. You could be anyone. A serial killer. A kidnapper." "Daniel Carter," he said, pulling out his driver's license and work ID to show her. "I'm the night janitor here. Been working this building for 4 years since my wife passed. My son Ethan and I live in the Riverside Apartments, Unit 312. You can call the building super, Mrs. Chen, to verify if you want. She'll vouch for me." "Why would you help a stranger?" Elena asked, suspicious after Adrian's calculated betrayal. "Especially one who's clearly a disaster?" Daniel thought of his wife Sarah, how she died 3 years ago from pancreatic cancer that took her in 4 months, leaving him to raise Ethan alone with no family support. His parents were gone. Sarah's family lived in Korea and barely knew Ethan existed. "Because sometimes strangers are just friends waiting to happen," he said, repeating what Sarah used to say at the community center where she'd volunteered teaching English to immigrants. "And because I know what it's like to feel like you're drowning with no life preserver in sight. After my wife died, strangers kept me and my son afloat. This is me paying it forward." The rain intensified, turning the streets into rivers. Lightning flashed, illuminating Elena's exhausted face. Her phone, dead from moisture damage, offered no salvation. Adrian hadn't returned her 37 calls or 18 increasingly desperate text messages. Her father's deadline loomed like an executioner's axe. She had no other options. No friends who weren't connected to Sterling Group. No family besides Richard. "Okay," she whispered, her pride crumbling like wet tissue paper. "Just for tonight. I'll pay you for the trouble." Daniel shook his head. "No payment needed." Let's just get you somewhere warm and dry. He helped her navigate the broken sidewalks, pushing her chair when the wheels stuck in puddles and debris, holding his own umbrella over her while getting thoroughly soaked himself. His apartment building was old, built in the 1960s, the elevator creaky and slow, graffiti on the walls, but when he opened his door, warmth and light and the smell of home flooded out. The apartment was small, but meticulously clean and organized. 900 square feet that held an entire life. Crayon drawings covered the refrigerator in overlapping layers of childhood creativity. Dinosaurs, robots, a family of 3 with one figure surrounded by hearts and labeled Mommy in Heaven. Toy robots lined the windowsill like sentries guarding against sadness. A New England Patriots blanket draped the worn couch that had seen better decades. Family photos covered one wall, a beautiful Korean woman with kind eyes appearing in most of them. Her smile radiant, even in casual snapshots. Dad? A young boy peered from behind a bedroom door, wearing dinosaur pajamas that were slightly too small. Who's the lady? Is she from your work? This is Elena, Daniel said carefully, hanging up his soaked jacket. She needs our help tonight. Remember what we talked about? About being kind to people who are having a hard time. Ethan nodded solemnly, then brightened with 8-year-old enthusiasm. Like when Mrs. Rodriguez needed help with groceries after her surgery, or when Tommy's family needed food after his dad lost his job, or when Mr. Park couldn't pay rent and we shared our dinners. Exactly like that. Daniel smiled, ruffling his son's dark hair. Can you get the extra blankets from the hall closet? The warm ones Grandma Sarah made. He grabbed clean towels from the bathroom, then hesitated at the doorway. The bathroom door's narrow, and there's a lip at the entrance. It's not really wheelchair accessible, but I can help, if you're comfortable with that. I helped my mom before she passed, so I know how to be respectful and maintain dignity. Elena felt embarrassed, but grateful for his matter-of-fact approach. Thank you. I'm usually more independent, but everything's been so hard lately. I feel like I'm falling apart at the seams. No shame in needing help, Daniel said simply. We all do sometimes. While Elena dried off in the bathroom with Daniel's respectful assistance, he kept his eyes averted, only helping where she specifically asked Ethan prepared his presentation with the seriousness of a UN ambassador. When she emerged wearing dry clothes, Daniel had found Sarah's old maternity wear he'd kept in storage, for reasons he couldn't explain. Ethan was waiting with hot chocolate made from scratch and a 1,000-piece puzzle spread across the coffee table. Do you like dinosaurs? He asked, seriously, as if this was the most important question in the world. I used to love them when I was young, Elena said, remembering her childhood obsession. The museum trips with her mother. Before Margaret got too busy being Mrs. Sterling. I had a whole collection of fossils my mom helped me find. Then you'll love this puzzle. It's a brachiosaurus. Dad says they were gentle giants who only ate plants and protected their babies. They were so tall they could eat leaves other dinosaurs couldn't reach. Kind of like how Dad gets stuff from high shelves for Mrs. Rodriguez. As Ethan explained each dinosaur in his extensive collection with the expertise of a tiny paleontologist, complete with pronunciation guides and fun facts, Elena felt something shift inside her chest. This tiny apartment, with its cramped rooms and dated appliances, held more genuine warmth than her father's mansion ever had. Daniel prepared simple grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup, apologizing for the modest meal. We usually have more variety, but I haven't gotten to the grocery store this week. Ethan's been home with a cold and I didn't want to drag him out. It's perfect, Elena said, meaning it completely. She couldn't remember the last time someone had cooked for her without being paid to do so. My mom used to make this when I was sick. Before she got too busy. Before the company consumed everything. That night, sleeping on the couch that pulled out into a surprisingly comfortable bed while rain drummed against the windows, Elena made a decision. She wouldn't sign her father's papers. She'd rather have nothing than sell her soul for his money. She'd survived the accident. She'd survived this too. In the morning, Daniel made pancakes from his grandmother's recipe, while Ethan showed Elena his artwork, each drawing accompanied by an elaborate story. This one's our family before, he said, pointing to 3 figures holding hands under a rainbow. But Mommy got sick and became an angel, so now she watches from the clouds. See? That's her face in the sun. Elena touched the drawing gently, feeling tears threaten. She's absolutely beautiful. You're very talented, Ethan. Dad says she sends us signs that she's still around. Ethan explained, matter-of-factly. Like when we see cardinals. Those were her favorite birds. Or, when we find lucky pennies. Maybe she sent you here because you needed us and we needed you. Daniel blushed furiously, nearly dropping the spatula. Ethan, that's not, we can't assume. Elena has her own life. It's okay, Elena interrupted, wiping her eyes. Maybe she did. I'd like to think so. I'd like to think someone up there is looking out for all of us. Over the following days, an unexpected routine developed that felt more natural than Elena's old life ever had. Daniel worked nights from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., coming home exhausted but always with a smile for his son. Elena watched Ethan after school, wheeling herself to the bus stop to meet him, helping with homework while teaching him card games her grandfather had taught her before he died. She contributed what money she had for groceries despite Daniel's protests, and learned to cook simple meals from YouTube videos, determined to be useful, to earn her place in their small sanctuary. 2 weeks into their arrangement, disaster struck. The media vultures found her like they always did, drawn to scandal, like flies to carrion. Photographers clustered outside the building like a pack of hungry wolves, capturing Daniel helping Elena into his beat-up Toyota Corolla with 200,000 miles on the odometer. The headlines were vicious and cruel, designed to humiliate. Sterling heiress shacks up with janitor. From riches to rags. Elena's rebound. Billionaire's daughter. Chooses mop boy over fortune. And worst of all, crippled heiress trades down. The comments online were even worse, dissecting her appearance, her wheelchair, her pregnancy, Daniel's obvious poverty. Someone had even taken photos of Ethan, though Daniel threatened legal action to have them removed. The building's residents whispered when she passed, some sympathetic, others clearly judging. Mrs. Chen, the super, remained kind, but Elena heard her telling another tenant that the attention was bad for the building's reputation. Richard's lawyer arrived that afternoon while Daniel was at work, his Mercedes S-Class looking absurdly out of place parked between a rusted pickup and a Honda with a missing bumper. Elena recognized Harrison Walsh, her father's chief legal counsel for 20 years, a man who'd bounced her on his knee as a child, and now looked at her like something he'd scrape off his Italian leather shoes. Miss Sterling, he said, his tone making it clear she no longer deserved the family name. Looking around the modest apartment with barely concealed disdain, his gaze lingered on the water stain on the ceiling, the cramped quarters, the obvious poverty. Your father is concerned about your recent choices. His concern is touching, Elena said dryly. Considering he threw me out like yesterday's garbage, he's willing to increase the settlement to $1 million, Harrison said, placing a Hermes briefcase on the scarred coffee table. The conditions remain the same, with the addition that you cease this transparent attempt to embarrass him by living with someone so far beneath your station. This janitor you've latched onto, it's unseemly. People are talking. The board is questioning your father's judgment, even more now. Elena felt rage building like a tsunami. Daniel Carter is worth 10 of my father and 100 of you. Is he worth your child's future? Harrison asked pointedly, adjusting his gold cufflinks that cost more than Daniel made in a month. Think about what you're doing, Miss Sterling. No private schools, no Harvard legacy admission, no trust fund, no opportunities, no connections. Your child will grow up in poverty, all because of your pride. Is that really what your mother would want? For her grandchild to suffer because you're too stubborn to see reason. The mention of her mother was a calculated cruelty. After he left, Elena sobbed until she could barely breathe, her chest heaving with the weight of her failures. When Daniel returned home at 7:30, exhausted from covering an extra shift, he found her packing with shaking hands. I'm destroying your life, she said, unable to meet his eyes. The photographers, the lawyers, the neighbors whispering and pointing. Other kids are bullying Ethan at school because of me. They're calling him names, saying his dad is sleeping with a cripple for money. Daniel knelt beside her wheelchair, gently taking her trembling hands in his calloused ones. "You know what Ethan told me yesterday? He said you're the best thing that happened to us since his mom died. And he's absolutely right." "But I'm a burden," Elena protested, tears streaming down her face. "I can't even contribute properly. I can't work. I'm pregnant with another man's child, paralyzed, disowned, followed by scandal everywhere I go. What could you possibly see in me?" Daniel cupped her face gently, his thumbs wiping away her tears. "I see someone who reads stories with different voices to make my son laugh until his sides hurt. Someone who taught him fractions when I couldn't figure out Common Core math. Someone who makes this apartment feel like a home again, instead of just a place where we exist between Sarah's death and whatever comes next. I see someone I'm falling in love with." Their eyes met, and Elena saw truth there, not calculation. "But Adrian," she started. "Adrian's a fool and a criminal," Daniel said firmly. "Any man who could walk away from you doesn't deserve to breathe the same air as you." That evening, needing closure, Elena called Adrian one last time. He answered on the 15th ring, clearly drunk, music pounding in the background. "Elena, for Christ's sake, stop calling. It's over. It was over the moment your daddy cut you off." "I'm pregnant with your child," she said steadily. "You can't just walk away from that responsibility." "So you claim," Adrian replied coldly, the music suddenly muting. "Look, it was fun while it lasted, but let's be realistic here. Your father cut you off completely. You're paralyzed, probably forever. What kind of future could we possibly have? I've got a reputation to maintain, a career to build. Being saddled with a crippled baby mama isn't part of my 5-year plan." The cruelty of his words cut deep but also freed her. "You said you loved me. You said my wheelchair didn't matter." Adrian laughed, ugly and mean. "I loved the sterling name and the doors it opened. I loved the insider information you gave me about your father's deals. Without that, you're just another girl in a wheelchair. And frankly, not worth the trouble. Don't contact me again. My lawyer will send papers terminating parental rights. I want nothing to do with you or the brat." He hung up. Elena stared at the phone, then at Daniel reading to Ethan on the couch, doing all the voices for Harry Potter, making his son giggle. Real love, she realized with crystal clarity, looked nothing like Adrian's promises and everything like this: patience, kindness, dinosaur puzzles, bedtime stories, and choosing to stay when leaving would be easier. 3 days later, Daniel overheard a conversation that changed everything. He was cleaning the executive floor of Meridian Industries, Sterling Group's biggest competitor, when Adrian's voice drifted from a conference room. The door was slightly ajar, and Daniel could see Adrian with several executives through the gap, all of them drinking expensive whiskey and laughing. "The old fool never suspected anything," Adrian boasted, loosening his tie. "His precious daughter was so desperate for attention after that accident. She told me everything. Sterling Group's expansion plans for Asia, their weaknesses in cybersecurity, the problems with their Singapore suppliers, even Richard's personal passwords. I had access to his home computer through her laptop. She gave me everything on a silver platter." Daniel pulled out his phone, carefully recording everything. His military training from 6 years in the Army, helping him remain invisible. Adrian detailed how he'd targeted Elena, specifically on orders from Marcus Vance, Meridian's CEO. Vance identified her as the weak link after the accident. Vulnerable. Desperate for validation. Isolated from her father. It was like taking candy from a baby. A paralyzed baby, he added, making the others laugh. "The pregnancy was unfortunate timing," Adrian continued, pouring another drink. "But it actually worked in our favor. Richard's so disgusted with his crippled daughter having a bastard child, he's barely functioning. Sterling Group stock is down 12% this month alone. We'll initiate the hostile takeover next quarter when they're at their weakest." Another executive asked, "What about the girl? Could she expose us?" Adrian waved dismissively. "She's broke. Living with some janitor in a slum. About to pop out a kid. Who'd believe her? Besides, I've got enough fabricated evidence to make her look like a bitter ex trying to get revenge." We're untouchable. Daniel's hands shook with rage. Elena had been systematically destroyed by calculated cruelty. He wanted to burst in and beat Adrian senseless. But revenge required patience and evidence. When he returned home, he found Elena teaching Ethan to paint with watercolors, her smile genuine despite everything she'd endured. He couldn't tell her yet, not without proof that would stand up in court. But he'd make this right if it killed him. Over the following week, Daniel became a detective. He traded shifts with coworkers to access different floors at different times, photographed documents left carelessly on printers, dug through trash for discarded papers, and even retrieved Adrian's discarded hard drive from the electronics recycling bin. Elena noticed his exhaustion. "You're working too hard," she said one evening, massaging his shoulders while Ethan did homework. "Let me help somehow. I feel useless just sitting here." "You are helping," Daniel said, watching her braid Ethan's hair for picture day with infinite patience. "More than you could possibly know. You've given us hope again." The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Ethan had accompanied Daniel to work on a Saturday when the babysitter canceled, playing quietly while Daniel cleaned. The boy found papers that had fallen behind a filing cabinet, internal Meridian emails discussing Operation Sterling teardown with detailed timelines, payment structures, and Adrian's role. "Dad, is this important?" Ethan asked, holding up the crumpled papers. Daniel read them, his heart racing. They outlined the entire conspiracy, including Adrian's monthly payments of $50,000 and the planned corporate raid scheduled for next month. But they needed more concrete evidence to take to authorities. Elena still had one friend at Sterling Group, her former assistant Jennifer Chen, who'd started as an intern when Elena was learning the business. Elena called her, explaining everything that had happened. Jennifer was horrified. "I knew Adrian was suspicious. He kept asking about your father's schedule, his passwords, even what medications he took. He said it was because he wanted to be a good son-in-law. He was always snooping around your office when you were in meetings." "Oh, Elena, I'm so sorry. We all should have seen it." Jennifer agreed to help, using her access to retrieve Adrian's old emails to Elena, cross-referencing dates with Meridian's strategic moves. The pattern was undeniable. Every piece of inside information Elena had inadvertently shared during their relationship had been weaponized against Sterling Group. Jennifer also discovered something else. Adrian was already engaged to Marcus Vance's daughter. Had been the entire time he was pursuing Elena. The engagement had been kept secret for strategic reasons. The investigation intensified over 3 weeks of careful planning and dangerous execution. Daniel used his janitor's access to map Meridian's security protocols, memorizing guard rotations and camera blind spots. Elena decoded the financial data Jennifer smuggled out on encrypted flash drives. Her business training invaluable. They worked after Ethan's bedtime, spreading documents across the kitchen table like generals planning a campaign. Elena identified patterns Daniel would have missed: shell companies, offshore accounts, money laundering through Delaware corporations. "This transaction here," Elena pointed out, tracing a complex trail. "That's how they're hiding Adrian's payments. Through 3 shell companies, then to the Caymans, then back as consulting fees. It's brilliant, but traceable if you know what to look for." Daniel marveled at her expertise. "You really were going to run Sterling Group. You'd have been brilliant at it." "In another life," Elena said sadly, her hand moving to her belly where the baby kicked. "Maybe in this life too," Daniel suggested. "Your father needs to know the truth." Elena shook her head. "He won't listen to me. He thinks I'm a failure." "Then, we make him listen," Daniel said, with determination. Their first attempt nearly ended in disaster. Daniel tried to access Meridian's secure server but triggered an alarm. Security guards flooded the floor within minutes. He hid in a supply closet for 3 hours, barely breathing, texting Elena to keep her calm. "I'm fine. Just playing hide-and-seek with security," he wrote. "That's not funny," she replied. "You have a son to come home to, and me. We need you safe." The "we need you" made his heart race more than the close call. Their second attempt was smarter. Jennifer arranged a meeting between Elena and Thomas Westbrook, a sympathetic board member, but he backed out at the last minute, scared of Richard's wrath. "We're running out of time," Elena said urgently. I'm due in 5 weeks. Meridian's takeover is next month. Daniel made a decision. Then we confront Adrian directly. Elena grabbed his arm. That's dangerous. He's desperate now. So are we, Daniel said. But we're also right. The plan was simple, but risky. Daniel would confront Adrian in the Meridian parking garage at 2 a.m. when security was minimal. Elena would wait in the car with the engine running, ready to call police if needed. But plans, like promises, often crumble under pressure. Adrian arrived early with 2 security guards, tipped off by someone. Daniel's heart sank until he heard a familiar voice. Adrian Miller? Richard Sterling emerged from behind a concrete pillar, flanked by his own security team. We need to talk. Elena gasped from the car. Her father looked older, grayer, diminished. But his presence still commanded attention. About what? Adrian asked nervously, his hand moving toward his jacket. About how you seduced my daughter for corporate espionage, Richard said coldly. Daniel stepped forward, holding up the evidence. Mr. Sterling, I have proof of everything. What followed was chaos. Adrian tried to run, but security blocked him. Cornered, he pulled a gun from his jacket. You don't understand, he shouted, waving it wildly. Marcus Vance owns judges, politicians, half the police force. If I don't deliver Sterling Group, I'm dead. Daniel moved instinctively between the gun and the car where Elena waited. Put it down, Adrian. This won't solve anything. You destroyed my daughter for money. Richard's voice broke with rage and grief. Adrian laughed bitterly. She was an assignment. The pregnancy complicated things. Makes her damaged goods now, doesn't it, Richard? The cruelty sparked something primal in Daniel. He started forward, but Elena's voice stopped everyone. She'd gotten out of the car, wheeling herself into view with remarkable calm. Adrian, look at me. Her voice was steady, commanding. You think you broke me? You think being paralyzed makes me weak? I survived an accident that should have killed me. I'm carrying a child despite everything. I found real love with a man who sees my worth beyond my name or my legs. You didn't break me. You freed me from a shallow life of lies. Adrian's hand shook. Shut up. The FBI is already investigating Meridian. Elena revealed what Jennifer had discovered. Marcus Vance was arrested this morning for insider trading and racketeering. You're alone. The sirens were audible now. Adrian looked around wildly, then dropped the gun and ran. Security tackled him before he reached the exit. As police led him away, he screamed about conspiracies, but the evidence was overwhelming. Richard approached Elena slowly. How long have you known? 3 weeks, Elena said. We've been gathering evidence to save your company. Richard looked at Daniel. You did this for her? We did it together. Daniel corrected. Your daughter's brilliant, Mr. Sterling. You just stopped seeing it when she stopped walking. Richard's shoulders sagged. Elena, I was so wrong. Can you forgive me? Elena felt tears coming. I don't know, Dad. You abandoned me when I needed you most. I know, Richard said. I was scared. When your mother died, I promised to protect you. Instead, I became the threat she would have fought. The conversation was interrupted by Elena, gasping in pain. The stress, she managed. The baby's coming now. The hospital room was controlled chaos. Elena was only 35 weeks pregnant, the baby arriving 5 weeks early from stress. Daniel held her hand while she crushed his fingers during contractions. Richard paced the hallway, forbidden from entering by Elena but unable to leave. Ethan stayed with Mrs. Rodriguez, drawing pictures and praying. You're doing amazing. Daniel whispered between contractions. I'm scared, Elena admitted. What if something's wrong? What if I can't be a good mother from a wheelchair? You're already a wonderful mother to Ethan, Daniel reminded her. This baby is lucky to have you. The delivery was complicated by Elena's paralysis, requiring careful monitoring. For 7 hours, she labored with Daniel, never leaving her side. Finally, at 2:43 a.m., A healthy baby boy entered the world. He's perfect, the doctor announced. Small at 5 pounds, but strong. Elena sobbed as they placed him on her chest. Hello, little one. I'm your mama. Daniel touched the baby's tiny hand. He has your eyes. And your determination, Elena said. You saved us both. You saved yourself, Daniel corrected. I just reminded you how strong you are. Richard knocked tentatively. May I? Elena nodded, exhausted. Her father entered slowly, tears flowing at the sight of his grandson. He's beautiful. What's his name? Elena looked at Daniel, who nodded. Thomas Daniel Sterling, she said. After both his grandfathers. Richard's composure cracked completely. My father would have been honored. The baby grasped Richard's finger with surprising strength. I'll do better, Richard promised. For all of you. Over the following days, the hospital room became a gathering place. Jennifer brought balloons. Mrs. Rodriguez brought tamales. Ethan brought his dinosaur collection. He needs to know about T-Rex first. Ethan explained seriously. The media attention shifted from scandal to redemption. Adrian's arrest exposed Meridian's corruption, saving Sterling Group. But in the hospital room, none of that mattered. What mattered was Elena learning to breastfeed, Ethan singing lullabies, and a new family taking shape. 2 months after Thomas's birth. Spring arrived in full bloom. The small backyard of Daniel's apartment building had been transformed through Richard's financing and Daniel's labor, not charity, but a grandfather wanting safe spaces for his grandsons. A ramp led to raised garden beds where Elena grew vegetables with Ethan's help. The tomatoes are huge, Ethan announced, Thomas babbling agreement from his bouncer. Elena laughed, soil on her hands, feeling more accomplished than any deal ever made her feel. Daniel was building a sandbox, his shirt off in the warm sun. Elena watched him work, still amazed this man had chosen them. Stop staring at my dad, Ethan teased. That's because I love him, Elena said simply. Ethan considered this. Does that mean you'll be my mom now? Only if you want me to be, Elena said. I already asked Thomas, Ethan said seriously. We voted. Daniel dropped his hammer, kneeling beside Elena's chair. Ethan's been practicing something, he said, pulling out a small velvet box. Will you marry us? Ethan asked excitedly. Dad says you have to marry all of us. Elena looked at the simple ring. Perfect, because it came with love, not lies. Yes, she said, crying and laughing. Yes, to all of you. Richard arrived for Sunday dinner, carrying legal documents making Elena full partner in Sterling Group. When you're ready, he said. The company needs your vision. I have a new vision now, Elena said, watching Thomas reach for Ethan. It includes boardrooms and sandboxes. The best visions do, Richard agreed. As the sun set, they gathered around the picnic table Daniel had built. Elena looked at each face her father, learning to be present. Daniel, her unexpected salvation. Ethan, her bonus son. Thomas, her miracle. Her legs might never work again, but her heart had never been fuller. You know what I realized? Elena said, holding Daniel's hand. I spent so long mourning what I lost, but losing all that led me here. Daniel squeezed her hand. Where you belong. Where we all belong, Ethan corrected. The documentary crew captured the moment not for scandal, but because sometimes real life writes the best endings. Elena looked at the camera. Family isn't about blood or money or ability. Family is about choosing each other. Again and again. Especially when it's hard. Daniel chose me when I had nothing. Ethan chose to share his dad. Thomas chose to arrive perfect. And Dad chose to change. That's our story. The camera pulled back, capturing the scene. A paralyzed woman surrounded by love. Building the life she never expected but deserved. Children played, men laughed, and hope bloomed like Elena's tomatoes, unexpected, resilient, and absolutely thriving.